Hello and welcome Land Rover fans, my name's Fraser and you are watching LR Live. In today's episode, because it's the weekend, I want to give you something just to ponder over, and quite simply it's one of the most iconic elements on a Land Rover Defender. It's been reproduced, it's been copied and it's been modified by many different manufacturers, and what I've got in front of me here is just a small selection, although it's pretty diverse in the way that they look, of the Land Rover Defender door hinge. So let's have a look and see what's on the market. Now, there's only ever been two Defender hinges. The first one, which came out on the early 110s, 300 TDI, 200 TDI, that ran right up until the TD5 was launched in the late 1990s, early 2000. That was a very squared off hinge, and generally, unless you're doing a full restoration and you want the specific door hinge to be the same, a lot of people upgrade and go for the TD5 style door hinge. And this is just a standard cast steel piece. It's a two-piece which has got a solid pin going through to hinge it. The way it's finished, it's actually got quite a textured finish. I don't know if you can see that. And the reason it's got a textured finish is because these are tumbled in a huge machine to sort of deburr them and give them this sort of shot peened finish. It's purely for the cost of manufacture in mass-produced situations like this, but the nice thing I do like about this finish is it does lend itself quite easily to painting, because it holds the paint nice because it's got a texture. The trouble is you do have to do quite a few coats to eliminate that mottled sort of textured finish. If you want it to be completely smooth when you paint it, that's something you're going to need to do. Now, a couple of things I'll mention is I always do a wobble test on hinges. So there's so many different, aftermarket versions out there, and they're definitely not all made to the same standard. So this particular one is by BRITPART, and I can confirm that the wobble test is quite good on this. So what I tend to do is try and move the hinges this way to put stress on that pin, the hinge pin, and I'll stop talking, and you can't hear any movement in there. So that's a really nice solid hinge. It doesn't flop, it's nice and tight. So you don't want it to be super tight because they're just going to creak and everything when you open them, but just make sure it's a nice firm sort of lever action. Now, while I've got this one, because I'm going to be talking about painting them, I'll just give you a quick tip. So a lot of people will paint these hinges flat on a table, and the problem with that is obviously you don't get any paint on the underside really. What I'd recommend is actually opening the hinge slightly to make sure that you get good paint coverage. Then pick a hole, any of the holes which have got the recessed concave section in there for the bolts, and get yourself an old screw, drop it through like that, and then wrap wire around that screw or string to actually hold it and support it up. And what that enables you to do is it eliminates a piece of wire going through the hole, coming round and coming up, which means that you'll get an area there which won't receive paint. So if you just hang it like this, that is the best way to paint them. Don't lay them on a table because you won't get good coverage. So there's a little tip for painting, and also they won't stick on the edges as well and stick to your paper or your desk. So this is the retainer captive nut that will actually locate into your bulkhead, and you'll have those in there already. The good chance is that they've sort of corroded and rotted and broken and snapped off. So it is worth investing in a pack of these. They're fairly inexpensive. You can buy stainless ones if you want to, but they literally just, it's very crude the way they're mounted, but these just clip on to the slot in the bulkhead, and then obviously when you screw your hinge through there, it will retain it. So it does work, and obviously it's worked for 30-40 years, but it is probably worth replacing these at the same time. So see if you can get yourself a kit which includes all the fixings. If you check in the link in the description below, that will give you an idea of what kits are available. So the next one I'm going to show you again is from BRITPART, and it's their CNC machined version. You can see it here. So it's very angular, it's very nicely machined. The finish is sort of a satin matte finish. That would be excellent for painting, to be honest. That would come up really nicely if you painted it. But I know they do them in different anodized finishes, so you might not want to paint them at all, but the option's there. So it's very reminiscent of a standard TD5 Defender hinge, just without the rounded corners. The actual mechanism there, the hinge is really nice and tight. There's no movement in there whatsoever. And yeah, a really nice addition if you wanted to go for something a little bit more modern. My only reservation with this particular item is that they've used a standard hex bolt to connect the two parts. And I'm guessing you can probably see the problem with that already, is that if you mount that onto your door, whether it's upside down or I don't know how it falls, but the bolt's probably at the bottom, you know, someone only has to undo that bolt and then literally the door is going to come straight off. So it really does, you know, impact the effectiveness of your security on your Defender. So that's something to be, you know, really conscious of. So something very different now, and it's a product from Optimill. And again, if you've been watching the series, you'll be familiar with that brand. So here we can see, again, no need to mention the finish because you know it's going to be exquisite. This is like a high satin finish. It's got their logo on here as well. Now the design is a little bit different, so I will show you some close-ups, but what you can see is they've sort of, again, retained the basic shape, which I guess you can't really avoid, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel too much. It looks like they've actually got a nylon bush press fitted into there with a solid steel, stainless steel pin. So, you know, that's going to be a really nice tight finish. And what's more, it's going to be extremely durable. Yeah, so they've also got nylon bushes in there, look. So you can see top and bottom, they've got a nylon washer bush. And then inside, they've also got the bush where the pins push through. So you are paying for some real engineering prowess on this. If they'd actually fitted these to Defenders when they first came out, nobody would be replacing their door hinges. It's that simple, they're that good. Now, one thing they also include is a full set of stainless bolts and gaskets to go with this. And the bolts, I'm pleased to say, are Torx security heads. So they're not impenetrable, but it makes it a lot more difficult for someone who wants to steal your hinges or your door or even your Defender getting access into it, because we do know that there's been a lot of issues recently over time with people having their doors just stolen because it's just so easy to remove them. So you'd mount this hinge from the back through the door, which means that no one can actually remove the hinge from the door. And what they've also done is they've included this security latch on here, which means when you mount the hinge before you put the door on it, when you're fitting them, you put it in, drop it down, and then you'd then screw it into the bulkhead. Then you put your doors on. And what that means is if anybody tried to steal your doors, they wouldn't be able to, because even if they removed these two bolts from here, top and bottom hinge, they wouldn't be able to remove it out of the bulkhead because this retaining piece, this peg, would actually stop it being taken. So a little bit before I mentioned the fact that on a standard hinge, because it comes with that sort of very rough surface, you might want to polish it. That's a lot of work. So if that was a sort of look you were wanting to go for, YRM do their own hinges which are polished. So far superior finish on the whole thing, to be honest. So it's not just the bit you see, but also you can see it's beautifully machined there. It's all machine finished, which means it's going to sit really nicely on your door and on your bulkhead. They've used a standard casting, albeit a much nicer casting possibly than this one here. You can see the detail there. So the casting on this is much better. So if you're going for a polished sort of chrome look on your Defender, if that's the look you're going for, there is something out there to help you achieve that. So these are the ones from YRM. Again, wobble test, a little bit of a rock on there, but they are a standard design. So moving on to the last hinge now, which is from EXMOOR Trim. There's a lot I like about this hinge, but there's a lot that lets it down, I think, a little bit, which is such a shame because aesthetically, I think it's by far the best looking hinge of all. So they've gone for a standard look. It's obviously a modernized version of this standard hinge here. So it's squared off a little bit more. You've got some angles in there. It just looks a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more robust. It's beautifully machined, and I really love the fact they've got these sort of copper coloured bushings in here. However, couple of drawbacks. It's got a slight wobble to it, so they're not the stiffest and most snugly fitted hinge on the market. They also suffer from the fact that they've used a standard pin bolt in there, which again means that the door hinges can be removed completely. Now, they may have thought, well, we're not doing anything security-wise with the bolts, so at the end of the day, you know, a hinge is a hinge and it can be stolen. I get that. Now they have gone to the trouble of including these, so you do get Torx security head on there, so they have sort of tried to help with security on the hinge a little bit. Ultimately, the Optimill probably gets my vote just because its form and function, which I think is so important nowadays when you're reinventing something that's sort of 40 years old. So they've taken the hinge, they've made it better, they've made it look nicer, and they've given it some really good sort of quality security features, which I really admire them for. It's just a shame, for me, it doesn't look like this, because I think this looks really nice. This EXMOOR trim hinge is by far the best looking hinge in my mind, but it just doesn't have the features that the Optimill has, which is a shame. But ultimately it's your Defender and you're going to build it how you want to, and I don't blame you. So there's lots of options there. Just remember, think outside the box again. If you're going to be doing a Defender build and you know, you're not sure which way to go, have a look at what you've done already and see if there are any elements there that we said before that you can actually continue throughout the design or throughout the build. Now I recently saw a post, I can't remember where I saw it now, but it was a Defender 110 that had been built specifically, I think, for a competition, and it was just a sort of a satin black finish. But what they'd actually done is they'd just taken a few elements such as the door hinges and the bonnet hinges, which were CNC machined, and painted them in this really like dark red, and it just really set the vehicle off. So again, you know, these are things that you can do because you've got so much opportunity to customize your Defender. If you've got a standard Defender in a standard color and you want to just like set yourself away a little bit and do something a little bit unique, you can actually paint your hinges, your door hinges and your bonnet hinges a slightly different shade or a very contrasting color, and it's just going to give the look of your vehicle something just totally unique. So always think outside the box. That would be my my recommendation, but always think about security as well, because these vehicles, they're becoming more and more desirable, more and more valuable. So just keep hold of your investment and do think about some security options when you're choosing new products. So that's everything from me today, just a quick one, but I hope you've enjoyed seeing the different hinges that are available on the market. And if you have enjoyed the video, do give me a thumbs up, that'd be great, and I definitely recommend you subscribe. Next week we're going to be announcing the winner of the Cubby box, so if you haven't left a comment on that video yet, please do so, and you might be picked out as the winner. So like I say, we're going to do that next week, and coming up in the next week or two is an exclusive product code as well for all subscribers, so that you can save big on the LR Parts website. So for now, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.